In this episode of Mortgage Tech Talks, I sit down with Shawn-Marc Melo. Shawn is a agent. He does his own book of business. He's a principal broker. He also has a lending company, and now he is working on some tech. So Shawn wears about four different hats, and it's really interesting this conversation to hear about really what that's like to wear those different hats, why he felt it was actually necessary to build a tech company to have those three other hats, and why that's unique in Canada versus something like the States. We get into that and really kind of the whole funding model around it. And then we dive finally into the tech that he actually is building, even though there's some big players trying to do the same thing, how he feels he can differentiate on it, and really more so his mindset overall about building tech and how he wants to see the overall industry move forward. So it's a really cool conversation. You're going to want to check it out. Join us for the ride. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mortgage Tech Talks. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. The gentleman who's with me today, he's been someone who kind of, I don't know, snaked through each other's paths, I guess, many times now in different capacities. So it seemed fitting to have him on and have a discussion and just talk about where he's at and kind of the current state of things. I think he's got some really cool insights. So I always like to let my guests do the intro because I find that I often learn things about them when they do their own intro. So if I were to do it myself, I wouldn't be doing it justice. So without any further ado, Shawn, I'll turn it over to you. I'd love to hear, maybe just for myself, like I said in the audience, a bit about who you are, and then we can get into the fun stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not a guest that doesn't need an introduction, at least not yet. Yeah, Shawn-Marc, principal broker, founder at Lendwire. Been in the industry now for quite some time. Worked my way as an agent and up to broker. And we started this company in 2023. We've been able to see kind of all sides of things, not just on the brokering side, but also on the lending and tech side. Ontario boy. And I love our industry. I love what I do.
Yeah.
I love what I do, and I'm not shy about it. I might not have the best reputation with certain underwriters, so if they're watching this, I apologize in advance. I mean, that's me. I'm a straightforward
Well,
hitter.
there you go.
Yeah, so it is funny you brought up the cross paths thing. I saw you when you first got started on Blue Mortgage. Okay, many moons
Okay.
ago, it feels like
Yeah.
now. And the cool part that I've always found
Five
about
years
you,
maybe. Yeah.
yeah, it is exact timing. Like right as you were kind of launching. I mean, this is
Yeah.
before, all of the kind of partnering with other companies, and you had just started Blue. And the cool part about you is that I don't know if you still do, but you would do the intake calls.
Hmm.
At the time, my brokerage, they weren't really open to using new stuff, and they really wanted to stay rooted in tradition. But I was like, you know what? This guy's got something here. He's going to do something. I know we crossed back again when I tried to reintegrate tech into that previous brokerage, but it's just cool to see where you're at now. I think that that's worth giving yourself flowers on. You used to grind. I'm sure you still do, but you were
No,
grinding.
no,
Like
I
I would see
appreciate
you
that,
in
man.
these,
Yeah.
and it was everywhere at one point. So it's very good to see that we've finally crossed in the right way.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. It's been a wild ride, and it's one of those things I think where, yeah, in those early days, well, yeah, when I was starting out and first interacting with folks like yourself, it was a lot of like, building the plane as you're flying it, right? Where, oh, we were talking about aviation right before, so throw back to the aviation conversation, but yeah, that's a lot of what it was. And I feel like that's a lot of, in some cases, what, building a tech company can feel like sometimes where there's a lot of excitement around tech, I think, and a lot of people who are interested in it, and a lot of people asking you for different things. And, you got to make sure that you're building a plane that will, serve your clients for sure, but you also want to make sure that you're building a plane that will
Yeah.
actually take off as well, right? You need to get flight. If you're going to load it
Right.
down with, a million things, it gets too heavy to even get off the ground. And I think in those early days, it's a lot of what a founder's job is to just almost force it off the ground, right? You're on the tarmac pushing the plane from behind, right? In a sense, you're giving it that jump start. And so, yeah, those are those early days. And obviously, we've grown a lot since, and it's been, like I said, a pretty fun ride. But
Yeah.
likewise with you, right? You were with a brokerage at the time, and now you have your own, and that's exciting. And I think that's kind of where our paths crossed again. I guess for the audience, Shawn and I both were just nominated for the Rising Stars in the industry, which is it's nice to get that recognition. I mean, for me, it doesn't change my day to day too much, but it's one of those things where it's just like, hey, it's good to know that people are seeing what we're doing and
Yeah. No, me
appreciating
either.
it. So, but I guess for you, Shawn, like, has that sort of recognition changed much for you? Like, what did it mean, and how was the impact on your side of things?
Yeah. I mean, same thing. It didn't necessarily change the day to day. I think it got our team on all sides fired up, whether it's the broker side or the tech side, just to get the recognition. Because for me, it is an individual award, but at the same time, it's also, kind of honoring what specifically you're doing to have achieved that. And so, in your
Mm.
case, Blue, in my case, Lendwire, and so it meant a lot in that aspect. Gave me a little more fuel because sometimes, you can get burnt out.
It's one of those things for sure where it's one of these classic posters, but I think it's true, which is people look at someone like yourself and they say, okay, rising star, okay, whatever, overnight success, that sort of thing. That picture of the iceberg, I think it's like a motivational poster that you see where what people see is the top, right? Okay, they see the awards, they see that you started your own brokerage, they see you're doing this tech thing, they just see that. But what they don't see is the underneath, right? All those maybe late nights working with developers trying to get features out the door. I know that's something that we deal with, and I'm sure you do too. It's those things that people don't see. And I mean, I'm speaking for myself now, and it's like not that I need people to see those things. It's just that's what I think the awards mean. It validates all those other things that we're doing. It's like, okay, we're doing something right here. It's we're at least going in the right direction. So yeah, no, it's good. I've taken the path of very focused on tech, where you've kind of taken the path of, you have your own book, you have your brokerage, you have this technology platform. It sounds like you're also doing a little bit on the lending side. So you're wearing a lot of different hats,
Yeah.
and I think it's commendable. But I'm just curious, your decision, like, was that an intentional decision? Was that just something you kind of stumbled into? Talk to me a little bit about that, kind of all these different hats that you wear.
It's honestly a common question, but it was kind of necessary. I think that's a direction that fintech is going anyway. For years and years, startups have been known to raise money and it works and it doesn't.
Pros and cons. Yeah.
Exactly. Most of the time when you're approaching investors, whether it's Mars DD or Mars IAF or going
DMZ.
into funds,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. When you're
Hmm.
going there, basically you have no revenue, you're a cash burner.
Oh yeah.
So it's become increasingly hard, even for the really great ideas, to kind of push forward past that step of, okay, we need help at this point. And so I took a little bit of inspiration from other fintech companies. I said, well, there has to be a way to incorporate having cash flow while also simultaneously launching what you love. So
Right.
I think that the brokerage and the lending side help with that cash flow so that, we can push some pretty aggressive and out there ideas, because we have a 6 product suite on the tech side. And
Wow.
I say if we were working just as a tech company, we probably would have one.
Yeah. Probably.
And
Yep.
that's okay. We're in a unique space that I know that you've seen too, where, specifically in Canada and in Ontario, we don't have a lot of, I would say, quote unquote, tech in this particular industry.
Not as much. Yeah.
We've seen ideas thrown out there. We've seen cloud-based programs that Nesto's brought out, or we've seen some stuff Pineapple's bringing, and we've seen Pine obviously, and how they've kind of had their niche on their side, but we're severely lacking. And I think that so much that we could bring into it to make the process easier for brokers and agents, to make the process easier for lenders, to make the process easier for consumers. And so that was kind of the birth of this company in general. It is a lot of hats, but it's mainly a focus on that flow. So I don't have to put too much pressure on my developers to
Mm.
perform, right?
Yeah.
Come on, we got to hit this deadline or we got to raise this money. Like, we actually haven't had a seed round
Wow.
at all.
Congrats. Yeah.
We're fully self funded. I did fully self fund, but at the same time, we've been able to just divert funds over to the tech side almost as like a loan for the future from the brokerage and lending
Right.
side.
A loan to self almost, right? It's like,
Exactly.
yeah.
It's, the
Yeah.
company's kind of
Yeah.
supporting,
Hmm.
Lendwire Inc., right? While Lendwire
Right.
Inc. and Lendwire Direct, which is our lending component, are carrying the load there. So that is kind of the idea of why we did all three in one. Do I think that there is longevity in all three? I mean, that's to be discussed. I think in
Of
general,
course.
the
Yeah.
industry is shifting, from a broker centric point to banks wanting to know how they can go direct to consumer.
Yeah.
So we'll see what the future holds. I have my suspicions on, changeover in the next decade or so, and
Okay. Well,
possibly agents not having as much responsibility as they do now, just based on the
interesting.
trajectory of banks
Yeah.
almost being able to accomplish direct to consumer.
Yeah. Well, I want to dive into that a bit, but maybe just a quick comment on what you were saying. I think it's almost necessary a little bit to make Canada tax because this is the flow I see is that if you want to go out and get an investor and raise a bunch of money, you got to hit a home run, right? If you're an investor, you don't invest in a single, you don't want to invest in double, you want to invest in the home runs. And then inevitably, when you talk to an investor says, let's hit home runs, they say, well, why are we operating in Canada? Why don't we go to our friendly neighbors to the south, the
Yep.
US, which is a 10 times market, right? If we're going to be hitting that home run, I want a 10 times chance of hitting that home run. And that's how it evolves. And I don't blame anyone specifically. I think that's just the market dynamics to say if you're a Canadian company that wants to go out and raise a bunch of money, you will inevitably drift south. And that's okay if you're selling like Instacart. I don't know if you know that company.
Oh, of course, yeah.
We use them all the time, one of our favorites. I have friends who work there and they were a Canadian company and they drifted south and now they're, doing their thing and they're great, but they're grocery delivery. That's not as regulated. That's, grocery delivery in Canada and US is kind of the same thing, more or less, different stores, but it's kind of the same. But in mortgages, it's completely different. And you might say, okay, well, there are quite a few similarities, but just with the regulation that exists, that alone, I mean, there's probably other things, but just the regulation in itself makes it different enough that they could be and probably should be treated as completely different industries.
Yep.
And so that brings it all back to say, okay, well, then if you want to make something for Canadian mortgages, you almost have to do this self-funded thing. And again, it's not good or bad. It's just maybe the reality of how things are. And so, hey, I think how you did it is probably a very practical way. And I think that's great. So yeah, talk to me a little bit about, I'm curious, you piqued my interest when you said, okay, you have some predictions for the future of, and I don't know if this is tinfoil hat time or if this is more,
Yeah, it could be.
data
It
driven
could be
and
tinfoil hat.
yeah, I love putting on my tinfoil hat. But yeah, you talked about okay, you kind of trajectory and drift over the next 10 years. Well, I'd love to first of all hear about kind of what those predictions are, but then bringing it back to tech, what are you building now or what are you thinking about now to take advantage of those trends?
Well, look, I mean, it's no secret. Banks, and we're talking about, the banks that are truly funding a lot of the monoline lenders or banks that are going already and offering brokers the opportunity to, bring deals to the table. I'm sure that there's always been the underlying, well, what if we didn't need this, right? What if we
Yeah,
could?
sure.
The problem with, I guess, going direct to consumer is it can be a hassle to onboard the client. And brokers are kind of a way to say, okay, these are the guidelines per bank. You're going
Mm-hmm.
to underwrite your client's application prior to submitting it to this bank. So you already
Mm-hmm.
know that if you're submitting a deal to BMO, these are the guidelines, this is what you can expect. So when you submit a deal, it should be with the intention that you're going to get an approval because you've sat
Mm-hmm.
there, you've underwritten the deal,
Yeah,
you've followed
you've
their
done the
their
work.
steps.
Yeah,
With that, you've also seen if they've qualified. I mean, you're not going to send a deal that's, 55 GDS TDS over to
waste of
TD
everyone's
Bank,
time. Yeah.
well, unless you're on the net worth program. But if you're sending just a regular deal out there, you're going to get a decline. All right. And the idea is that the broker, can help manage the funding ratios of these banks. And that's why, certain banks have these very stringent, okay, well, you need to fund X amount of deals, or your commitment to funding ratios got to be at 70%, right? So that's
Yeah.
basically our job right now. I do believe that we're headed in a way with, and I don't want to really go too deep into the AI stuff. Like, I think there's a time and place for that,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
do feel like using that as an example of where we're at today, I do feel
Mm-hmm.
like there'll be more and more opportunity for the bank to figure it out, especially on
Sure.
prime business. And I've had high level talks with a couple people in the industry about this, and I think prime business is what would be up for grabs, in my opinion. I think alternative and private mortgages will always have a place where brokers will need to assist, right? But I think as technology gets better, those simple deals where the GDS TDS is 29, 34, they both have jobs, pay stubs, it's basic.
Salary jobs,
Salaried,
just
simple,
yeah.
confirmable income. It's going to be a quick situation. I don't see why you would need a broker if technology is advancing to a point where it can take in those
Mm,
documents, confirm it's not fraudulent, and adjudicate that it actually works with the policies that are in place at the bank. Why it couldn't just go directly from client to machine to underwriter to funding? I don't see
yeah.
why not. On prime business, obviously, an
Mm,
alternative business, there's a lot
yeah.
of factors. When you're using 12-month bank statements, when have clients that are relying on, say, pension income as well as part-time income working at a coffee shop, There's so much complexity in those deals, especially on the private side too. I do feel like maybe, that's not the
Totally.
niche that will be cut out, but I do have predictions on the prime side. And tech wise, what we're building, I wouldn't say that we're at the level to assist in that department. What we are building right now is our Lendy. So it's basically an assistant for lenders specifically
Mm,
for underwriters. And the assistant is
mm,
essentially supposed to help the underwriters speed up the process when reviewing files.
okay.
It can help detect fraud. It can do an analysis to see whether or not these guidelines are met prior to the underwriter, actually going in and asking the broker questions and underwriting the deal. It came from a pain point of mine. I won't name the bank. Well, there's a few of them, but I won't name them. But like,
No naming names. Yeah. All right. Tell me after. Yeah.
well, they have these great policies and they're a
Yeah.
really good bank for people who need opportunity. But the time to underwrite was just egregiously long.
Yeah.
Like we're talking
Hmm.
5 days to 7 days, where I'm sitting
Yeah.
there and then I get an
Not
email.
practical.
Yeah, it's not practical.
Yeah.
And I forget I even submit the deal, or my agents forget, like, oh, this is in
Yeah.
the pipeline. It's meant for a situation like that. So instead of that 5 to 7 days where you need the human interaction immediately to look at the file and review, it will go into this system that we've built and it will kind of spit out, okay, well, yes, these documents are true and legit. Yes, this does fit under our policies and guidelines, and it gives a percentage chance at the current time.
Wow.
It doesn't give a full on, this is good to go. We're a little bit of a ways from that. But right now, there's a percentage that's given of how likely this deal is to be approved based on
Wow.
reviewing the information. And, lenders can set their own parameters with that.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
okay,
Right. Yeah.
here at X Bank, we want the system to only spit to us deals that have a 70% chance of approval based on our criteria and based on initial review from the system.
Right.
So it will only spit out those deals. Anything below that threshold will be tossed to the side.
Take it back.
Or
Yep.
it can be flagged for human review, right? It's a we're unsure, please review this file. And you can
Mm,
scale it up from 50% to 95% if you want to get pinpoint
right.
accuracy. I don't think it's something that prime lenders are really going to line up to use to start. Already, when you're dealing with prime lenders in tech, it's a very
Yeah.
long, tenuous process to even get in the door.
It's like turning the Titanic
It
around.
is,
It's
honestly.
yeah. Yeah.
And you could be really excited about an idea that you have, and I am. I'm genuinely excited, just like I know you're genuinely excited about stuff that you have. But that
Yeah.
doesn't really translate to them. Kind of, it's a big organization and changing the systems. So we're starting to accept applications for private lenders to start
Yeah.
mortgage investment
Mm-hmm.
corporations, where we can
Yep. Nice.
test
Yeah.
with them to see how that helps them, stop wasting time as well. And we'll
Yes.
go from there
Yeah.
and build kind of a case use. So we do have an initial set that we'll be using Lendy to start, but that's kind of our answer to
Nice.
that. And imagine if we're building something like that on a small scale in Whitby, Ontario, and in Toronto, Ontario, where our offices are. Imagine what will be done down the line when other Lendwires pop up.
Sure.
Because, I don't feel like we're going to be the only hybrid brokerage lender tech company. I think that, you know,
Good. Yep.
even Nesto at a point, they had their cloud.
Well, they're going that way. Yeah. They have the Nesto Cloud. I don't know
Exactly.
if you've seen that,
Oh,
but
it's amazing.
yep.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
And
Is it? Okay. I haven't seen it, but I've heard of
it's
it.
it's
So
great. I
okay.
think, I have to give it to Nesto just based on, I think that there was some figuring out what it is their role to play en masse in the industry was. And they figured it out and they've executed very well. I think their recent acquisitions are brilliant.
CMLS, right? They bought. Yeah.
Partnership, I believe, with M3. I don't know if that's with Boss,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So I think that
Yep.
they've made very strategic moves that I think for the future, as what I consider a leader in fintech is their company, it's going to be great. And I could say the
Hmm.
same thing, with Wealth Simple and Pine, and I could also simultaneously say the same thing about other smaller brokerages that are coming out with that. So I'm not the only one. I just think that it's going to be more and more common as the next generation of principal brokers and idea engineers come
Yeah.
out that they're going to have this hybrid model that can help kickstart
Yeah.
ideas.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's so interesting. And if you look at something like Nesto, you're almost a microcosm of that, right? Nesto started as a brokerage.
Mm,
Then they started to do some lending, and then they started to do some tech, and then they, did some acquisitions, some partnerships. They bought, I think, Canada Life's book of business because they wanted to get out of the mortgage industry. They of course, did the CMLS acquisition, which I think what's lost in that acquisition for some people at least is not just the book of business, it's not just the lending, it's also Intellify, right? Which is the system that CMLS uses and provides to other lenders, big lenders, like on their website, they have like National Bank and some of these other ones. And so, they're very much so going that way, right? Starting out as a brokerage, which I think is, maybe the lowest barrier for a big company to get in and just start doing stuff. And I know Pine kind of did the same thing. They
Mhm.
said, we just need to get in there. We just need to start talking to consumers. You start doing that. And a broker is a great way to do that because it's not easy, but you can just kind of start to be a lender. You have to raise some money, right? You have to actually
Yeah,
get something to actually lend
which is
out.
another
Whereas a
story.
broker,
Yeah,
well, yeah, which I'm sure we should get into another day. But yeah, so broker is kind of that nice place to get a foothold. And then over time, you say, okay, well, if I'm brokering all these deals and building all these relationships with clients, the extension is to say, oh, maybe I can write some of these own deals and maybe take a bigger piece of the
yeah.
pie in terms of the money that you would make on that deal. And then the final piece is to then say, okay, well, now I'm lending, and tell me if this is your journey or not, but I'm just kind of extrapolating is to say, okay, well, now I'm lending, now I'm doing these things, and geez, there's not a lot of good tech out there. There's not a lot of tools out there. And if I can build the right tech, that can really differentiate me from the next lender and the next lender and the next lender. Because we've worked with some mix on the CRM side, and technology is not necessarily the strength, and that's not a bad thing. There's some mix that we've worked with or interacted with where they do most of their stuff with pen and
Yeah,
paper, and that's okay, right? They differentiate in other ways.
exactly.
I'm
Yep.
not saying that's good or bad, but yeah, the tech is absolutely something I think a lot more people are going towards to differentiate. So I guess maybe my question to you, Sean, you talk about your product and your tech product, but then you're also talking about, hey, someone like a Nesto is doing something similar. How do you position yourself to differentiate? And I don't know if I'm putting you on the
Oh
spot here,
no.
but look at something like Nesto to say, oh, this is a big company with a lot of money. They're doing some really cool stuff. I'm trying to do something similar. But how do you say, but we're different in this way? Or hey, we're more, innovative in this way? How do you kind of find your niche when in your own words you said, hey, more and more people are going to go down this path that we've gone down?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first of all, they're a major inspiration for us among other companies that we've, drawn inspiration from. I think what they've done is amazing. It should be amazing because they've birthed a whole slew of companies very similar to mine just from
Yeah,
them taking that
yeah,
step. But
yep,
to differentiate, first and foremost, I was very happy being an agent. I worked at a very small brokerage out of Vaughan with, the best mentor you can ask for to even get involved in this stuff, Anthony Ambrosio. I was really just happy to do that forever. I actually started with the tech ideas back at CSI. And so my wall at home,
mm,
I have kind of like this storyboard of just all these ideas that I had to fix these issues, could see and was experiencing. And, I wanted to do this and I did mull starting it there. I think that, we revert back and bring up that it's very hard to launch anything here in Canada, especially when regulation changes province to province.
yeah,
In the US, it's the same thing, right? It changes state to state.
state to state, and there's 50 of them.
Right.
Yeah,
And I've gone through the
yeah,
licensing process in Florida and it's just completely different behemoth, a completely different set of rules. And that applies to, 50 states. So how do you build
yep,
something that can really scale at that level specifically? That was the thought that I had in the beginning. And so I
yeah,
decided, you know what? I'll go off, do my own thing. It was actually very hard to leave. I really enjoyed that company and do it this way. Otherwise, if we did have, our own version of Silicon Valley in Ontario or in Canada, I probably would have just gone the tech route only. But,
mm,
I'm happy with how this turned out anyway. I'm glad we did this route. But in terms of ingenuity and keeping things different, there's always going to be crossover in different
yeah,
things. It's inevitable. One idea that you have, somebody across the world's having as well. It's who executes
true,
it faster. I do believe that we are first to market on a couple things. And, quite frankly, we're not first to market on other product suites that we've just really taken something that exists and made it better or made our version
mm-hmm,
of it that we feel hits a little bit different. So, we're constantly
yep,
going to have to update. I know that, one of our products will probably be more affluent than the others, and we'll assess it as the time comes. I have
yeah,
an idea of which one will be the most popular, but we just try to do what we can to keep up to date and continue to bring it forward. There will be people who see something that we release and come out and release something new, fresh, and better. It's
Sure.
going to be a matter of continuing to innovate while also having something that's innovative.
That's interesting way to put it. Yeah.
It does sound so simple,
Yeah.
and people might be like, "Oh, well, that's what you're supposed to do." Oftentimes, it stops happening once you're at a certain point. You can
Totally.
really
Yeah.
feel that as a founder, like, you can get comfortable. It's possible for people to get
Yeah.
comfortable, and that would, breathe into companies that are no longer here, who've shut their doors or who sold their operations, right? Very easy to
Mhm.
get comfortable. So we want to try to continue to improve upon always what's built and work with our frenemies in the industry in order
Right.
to work
Yeah.
together. I think that a level of cohesion
Yep.
is going to be necessary for this industry to get to the level that I believe it should be at. I look at some of the stuff
Yep.
that they use in the US, and then I look up here in Canada and I say, well, there's a big gap. And naturally, there should be.
Mhm.
The US is obviously, they have a lot more available funds. They have a lot, more ability to bring tech companies off the ground, but we're still behind. It kind of baffles my mind. While I was working on some of this stuff with our developers, I really had to sit back and think, like, wow, we really don't have anything like this. I'm pretty shocked that
Yep.
nobody's thought of it. But I think it comes down to, again, people don't want to throw money at it because they're not sure whether or not it's going to take off anyway in this specific market.
Can my dollar go further somewhere else? I think that's such an interesting thing, which is to say, if I could summarize, I think it is actually fair to say, I think as you put it, you have an idea, someone across the world probably has the same idea, and maybe many people across the world have the same idea. So, okay, we got to keep those ideas fresh. Absolutely, got to innovate. But I think when it comes down to it, what really kind of moves the needle for a lot of these ideas, I mean, a lot of people can have ideas, but execution, and that can be either manpower or capital power to actually execute
Yeah,
and get it done, right? I think, Gary Vee, I'm a fan of his, but he has a quote that says, hey, when it comes down to it, nothing beats execution, right? I think, I mean, we have lots of conversations, a lot of brokers, lots of smart people, and they have a lot of great ideas about tech, right? Hey, do you know what, I think there could be an opportunity here, or hey, do you know what, I know a friend who's a developer and I think I want to go out and build something. And then we check in a year later and nothing's really moved, and that's fine. I'm not disparaging that. But I think that's really, I think, something that's allowed you to succeed, it sounds like, is just being able to actually do it, right? I mean, I think a lot of people wearing the three hats that you are as a lender, as a principal broker, and as just a broker, to go out and get that fourth hat of doing tech. A lot of people just aren't able to execute on that. It's just not something that they're able to do. So that execution, that ability to do it, is actually quite rare, and that can be a differentiation in itself. I think that speed to market and executing against that quick to market mentality is something that can really differentiate people. And like you said, in this market, because we are a little bit capital
yeah,
starved. And so
definitely.
if you're able to fund it and execute against it, then yeah, you are going to rise above, because hey, there's not someone who's going to come in and throw a bunch of money and try to overtake you. It's just not as much of a reality here in Canada, as it is in the
Yeah,
US.
I agree. I agree. Those are great points. Listen, I 100% agree with what was said. And it kind of sucks because there are great ideas that, I've heard that just don't go
Yeah.
anywhere. And
Well,
I'm
that's true
hoping
too.
that this
Yeah.
can serve as an inspiration for some of those guys who have those ideas to say, hey, this is the best way that you can try and self fund. It does feel like a lot. It can be, overwhelming, but the ability to be able to get your stuff to life, there's nothing like it. It
Yeah.
wouldn't exist without the brokerage operations or the lending operations, right? These ideas that we had
Yep.
would just still be ideas because they were so
Yep.
grand and out there. And time, I mean, our mobile app, which was the most controversial decision that I think a lot of people were like, why are you wasting time on this? It's not a cash cow. And I said, well,
Yeah.
something you said actually in the Rising Star interview, this is when I knew that you're truly a rising star, was you get it when it comes to marketing, advertising, and actually getting your stuff in front of brokers or consumers or whoever. It's all about being seen. I
Mhm.
mean, your keywords on Google speak to that. If I type CRM, mortgage, if I type, a bank, you pop up. If you're there, your brand presence is there. You see it on Finmo, you see
Yeah.
it, in Filogix. You're just constantly reminded, Blue, you've done a great job on social media. You're in front of people. So synonymously, whether you
Mhm.
believe it or
Yeah.
not, you're a big player, whether or not that translates to every single brokerage in in Ontario using your stuff, you built the name and the reputation enough based on that. And so that was the idea
Mm,
behind the app as well. It was like, okay, well, we want to get in front of
yeah.
consumers. We want to get in front of people. And so we looked at,
Yep.
the app store, and we're going through, DLC's app, and a bunch of different mortgage companies have apps or
Yeah.
calculators. And we said, well, what is the purpose of this? Generally, the app, they want to take applications. They have some calculators there that, are basically stock UI, UX that, you can get anywhere in bottle market, if anything.
Sure.
And,
Yeah.
the ability to call your broker or see contact information. Like there was nothing in there that really said, why does a consumer need this app? If anything, it's in the folder on their iPhone that they never open.
Utilities, right?
So, and I said, well, okay, well, that
Yeah.
makes sense. Look, the
Yeah.
budget for
Yeah.
them wasn't about that. It was about being seen in the brand. So I said, what if we combine that and then we created something for consumers that was special on this app? And so
Mm,
on our mobile
yep.
app, it's a much different experience. And we've had the pleasure of having some consumers test it, and we've had it in beta now for the last month, ready to launch actually in the next couple weeks. Yeah, our brokers are going to be using it as of next week. But the part about the app is, you know what? Yeah, we did spend quite a bit of our budget to create this, but the result is going to be it is more than just an open and calculate. We have a budgeting tool in there that's very comprehensive that fills the gap of what was the one that shut down recently? It was bought by QB, I think, QuickBooks. It's on the tip of my tongue, right?
Oh,
Mint.
oh, mint, mint,
So
mint.
we've kind of
Yeah.
taken the best of all
Yeah.
the finances. So hey, you know, come on into
Yeah.
our app. You don't need to be a client of Lendwire to use it per se. And we don't have a focus on, yeah, we need you to sign up for a mortgage. It's really like, let's manage your
Right.
overall financial health. So there's the budgeting tool in there where you can sync your investment accounts and your bank accounts and checking, see your net worth, track expenses, create budgets, and the basic things that you can do, but with a little bit of a twist where it incorporates your mortgage in real time. So you can link
Yeah.
your EQ mortgage or your First Nat mortgage, or if you close the deal with us, it will automatically load your Lendwire Direct and or the deal with your broker.
Load
Documents
up.
are available to be downloaded for our clients specifically so that there's transparency there. Oftentimes clients say, oh, well, I lost this or I lost that. It will auto load for you in the app
Yeah.
upon closing, and other parts to it too, like the secured visa. A lot of people thought that that was a very strange thing, but we wanted a way for the client to build credit internally if we denied them. Because once we deny client, let's say we have a customer acquisition cost, that client is now gone.
Yep. Well, you've
Right.
already paid
So
that,
we
right?
paid it, client
Yeah.
leaves.
Yeah.
We probably don't see them again because they're going to redo the process once they feel their credit is okay. And maybe they end up at a different lender or a different brokerage. So
With
the secured
whoever.
visa
Yeah.
is meant to
Yeah.
be there specifically so that we can kind of keep them in house still. Our
Yeah.
unique proposition on that is for our clients who are, B clients or private clients, we will take a portion of, the earnings that we receive and actually load the secured visa for you
Oh, wow.
with anywhere
Impressive.
from
Cool.
250
Yeah.
to $1,000. We will allow you to build
Wow.
credit and report that credit back. So those are the small things. Like, so, you take an app that there's 50 of them in our industry there, and then you make something unique like this.
Yeah.
And that leads back to your value prop question, is what are we doing to create the value?
Totally.
Now,
Yeah.
people will see our app, and there might be a chance that another brokerage hires a developer
Hey,
online and says, build me something like this.
do this.
And that's how it snowballs.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
how do we take that app and continue to make it better? What do we
Yep.
add to it aside from what we have when people now see that it works and they also want something similar? What do we do to make it better?
It's an interesting thing, bringing it back to talk about how, where we try to be in front of people, we try to do, our social media and try to provide value that way. And for you doing the visa and doing budgeting, right? That's not a direct translation to say, hey, someone does a budget with you today and then tomorrow they're going to do a mortgage with you, right? It doesn't work that way.
No.
And that's okay. You know what? I think my mentality, and let me know if you agree with this, is a lot of it is just providing value. I'm a
Bingo.
strong believer this is a little bit like esoteric. I don't know what the right word is, but my belief is that if you put value out into the world, you're going to get it back many times over.
I
And it
agree.
might not be direct. You might not see it on day one. You might not see it on day 100, but all is said and done, you do see that back. And it might be, a conversation like we're having today that leads to something else. Who knows, right? But if you can provide that value in a meaningful way, in a scalable way, you're going to see it one way or the other back. So I think that that's a huge thing there. And then the second point that you talked about is, these frenemies, as you put it, to take a look at your app and say, hey, that's cool, let's do that and have that inspiration. I love that you're excited about being an inspiration because some people want to be like, oh no, I want to close things down and I'm going to maybe, I don't know, do a legal action against anybody who might copy me. But, I think that that's not good for really anybody. That's the opposite, right? That's kind of saying, what would you call it? Like a,
Well, pretty much a
just
monopoly
a
if we're talking.
zero sum game,
Yeah.
right? It doesn't lead to anything. But the opposite is, okay, if they do that, then you're inspired to innovate, and then your app gets better, their app gets better, and then in the end, the consumer is way better for it, and we have a more vibrant industry, right? And then
Yes.
again, that's going to pay back many times over. So I love that mentality if you have it, Sean. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. And I think that you're right on it too with having it as well. Like, look, I'm more than happy if we can move this thing forward here in Ontario and in Canada. To me, it doesn't matter whether or not we have carbon copies or whether or not any of that doesn't matter to me. I really just want to bring things forward to the level that I feel we can get here.
Cool.
And I'm one person in a group of hundreds that are doing that in their own specific areas. And that's, why we also offer white label anyways. Cause like, well, it's okay. If you want to take this template
Yeah.
and do something better, here's the white label for it. Let's
Yeah.
go.
If you have a
Use our
cool
API
idea, like,
services, right?
yeah,
We want
awesome.
that. Like
Very
I
cool.
genuinely am excited for the next 2, 3 years in this particular industry to see how things progress and change. And I hope that,
Love it. Yeah.
regulatory bodies like, obviously FISRA and ones out in BC and then RICA, I
BFSA.
hope
Yeah.
that they embrace it and that they, can see the value in it as well.
Yeah, because that's a big part of it too, right? Yeah, is dealing with the regulator. For sure, for sure. So, no, I love it, Sean. Listen, we're getting to time
Yeah,
here,
absolutely.
but really love this convo. This was a blast. I always do like chatting with you. And like I said at the beginning, there's so much I learn about my guests, and I think I've learned that much more about you today. So, really appreciate it. I guess just to wrap up,
Yeah.
you're doing some really exciting things. If someone listening today said, that's cool, I'd like to just chat with Sean, or maybe interested in a couple of the products that you chatted about, where can people reach you? What would be the best way to do that?
Yeah, so they can go online to our website, lendwire.com. They can obviously email me directly as well. Catch me on LinkedIn. That's also a possibility as well. I mean, I am pretty responsive there. And, if not, I try my best to be. I'm an open person. You can email me, Sean at lendwire.com.
That's true. I know you're open. Yeah,
We
yeah,
can discuss. You
yeah.
don't have to talk to an assistant or, so somebody else.
An automated,
Talk to me
yeah. Press
directly.
one for.
That's okay. When you call the 186, you definitely have to pick the right options.
Uh-oh.
All right? Because
I'll put you in some hot
we got
water
but
here.
we
Yeah.
have to have crowd control. But
Yeah,
at
that's
the end
it.
of the day, I'm
Yeah.
happy to speak with anybody that wants to speak with me. Absolutely.
No, I love it. Love it. Well, listen, John, thanks again for this. Hopefully we'll chat soon, but thanks again.
Thank you,
And
Tom.
yeah,
Thank
best
you.
of luck. Love to stay tapped in on what you're up to. This has been great.
Me too. Thanks, Tom. Appreciate you.